Well, hi guys, welcome to the Etihad. I know 8,000 of you were here over my shoulder in that away end tonight, singing your hearts out all night long, but you know, it was felt like a bit of a wasted journey because Newcastle were never at the races tonight against Manchester City, and it felt to me like they really played in second gear tonight. And you know, Newcastle, even if they had scored, they did have a couple of chances. Even if they had scored, I did feel that Man City probably could have put the foot down and scored a couple more. And I think the gap between Newcastle and City in the Premier League right now was just glaringly obvious to everyone. And you know, Pep Guardiola just made a good point in his news conference afterwards, saying that, you know, Newcastle's the first time they've had to play 3-4 matches in a row. Play a match every 3-4 days, should I say. And he said, look, it wasn't easy for us when we started doing that, and it takes a while to get used to it, and that's probably why Newcastle have been punished this season. I think, look, as much as we can question tactics, team selection, and I know everyone's got their own say in a lot of these things, I think the schedule of this season combined with the injuries, whose fault are the injuries? You know, I think that's a question probably for another time, but I think the schedule and just the players getting used to having to play high level games every 3-4 days is something at Newcastle, with their, you know, fairly limited squad in terms of numbers, is something they've just not managed to deal with this season. And yeah, that tonight just felt, you know, certainly for you guys as supporters, it felt for us in the media as quite a sort of depressing night, because it just felt like Newcastle weren't at the races and it just didn't really matter. You know, I know they had a couple of chances. Isak's had that one shot at 2-0 down. He had a couple of breaks here just over my shoulder with Dan Burn and Willock when they kind of got themselves mixed up, and then Isak had another one he couldn't get out of his feet. But it was few and far between, really, and it felt very much like men against boys. And as I say, City won it for me at a canter tonight. Yes, both goals were deflections. Unlucky, you would say. I felt the Dan Burn one was probably a little bit more unlucky than the Botman one, if you're Sven Botman. I was just chatting to Steve Howie, former Newcastle central defender, and he said, you know, he agreed with me. He said, look, if you're a central defender, the ball's coming at you, you know the keeper's probably going to cover it, you just let it go. Or if you can get a full head on it, you clear it away for a corner or a throw-in. But for him to deflect that away from Dubravka, by the way, I think Dubravka probably could have done a little bit better than that as well, if I'm honest with you. It just felt he kind of dived out the way of it. But I think for Newcastle to lose two soft goals like that, it just summed up the whole situation, their whole kind of challenge at the moment. And the game was done. The game was done at 2-0. It really was. And you know, fair play to the Newcastle fans who stayed until the bitter end, clapped the team off, all 8,000 of you, because you know, I think your backing of the team today was unbelievable. And you know, still to be singing the manager's name and the players' names at the end, when you know that's yet another season without a trophy. What, 68 years now, going back to 1955. It must be pretty hard to take, especially when you see the likes of Coventry through to the semi-finals at Wembley. And it's just been one of these years for Newcastle, I think, where nothing's gone right for you. And I remember people last season, you know, when we saw the cup runs, and Newcastle got very lucky, I think, even in the semi-final playing Southampton when it could have been Manchester City. The cup runs at home all the way to the final, and thinking, oh, this is it, this is Newcastle's luck now. You need to take advantage of those situations. And I think Manchester United in the final, you would have taken that and you'd have thought you could have won that game, and just to have come away and not performed on the day is something that I think still probably rankles with the management team, and I guess you guys as supporters as well, because you have to take these moments when they're there. They don't come around all the time, and I just think for Newcastle today just showed exactly why, because you can then get into the FA Cup, you can have 3 or 4 good performances against Fulham, against Sunderland, against Blackburn, squeeze through, but then you can draw Manchester City away, and it's nigh on impossible. And look, I think everyone knew coming down today that it was going to be a huge ask to get through, and it would have taken a huge amount of luck. And of course Newcastle, well, look, they didn't have that luck tonight. Just looking at the game, back five, was it the right thing to do? I just asked Eddie Howe in his press comments afterwards. He said, look, we wanted to give Manchester City something else to think about. We've played them so many times this season that I didn't want to go the usual. I wanted to give them something else to think about, play with a front two, and they did that with Isak and Gordon. I think it maybe gave them 1 or 2 things to think about, but I think Man City are too good to be put off by anything like that. And I just felt that looking at the back five, you know, when you're playing Jacob Murphy at right wing back, who's an attacker, and Dan Burn at left wing back, who's a centre half, really, it was just felt all a bit lopsided. And I could not believe how high for a back five. Normally a back five you'd expect them to sit in low block and just pick up the spaces and not allow them to get through, let Manchester City shoot from range. But I felt like they put a really high line for a back five, but yet weren't closing them down in the penalty area, which is why those shots were deflected into the net. And it looked like something that they probably need to work a little bit longer on. And I think trialling it for the first time against Manchester City was probably you're on to a real hiding, really, because you're going to be under the cosh, and you could see the players were kind of a little bit confused as to where they needed to be at times as they were trying to learn the position. I mean, Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff we hardly saw them in the first half because I think they were just trying to plug gaps in midfield. Sven Botman was almost playing like a third central midfielder at times because he was stepping in to go with Haaland or to go with whoever it was that was dropping in deep, and Man City just moved Newcastle around, and I felt Newcastle looked confused at times. Yes, it probably looks better in the second half because they didn't concede, but I think it was pretty much a training match for Man City in the second half, and they were just happy to get out of here without any injuries really and go into that international break knowing that, as Pep's just said in his post-match press comments, knowing they've got huge games every 3 days between now and the end of the season. And I think they just, tonight for them, it was just get through minimum fuss, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, for Newcastle now, where they concentrate on the league, but it feels very much like the season's done. Yes, you can qualify for the Europa League or the Europa Conference League, but just when you compare it to last season, it's been a real tough one to take. And look, we saw it happen to Leicester a few years ago, didn't we? And I think everyone knew that, once Newcastle qualified for the Champions League and their squad isn't big enough to cope with those amount of games. That's before the injuries even kicked in. I think everyone knew it was going to be difficult this season, but I think it's the reality of it is quite hard hitting and quite hard for everyone to take in, knowing that you need to go again next season. But look, I think without the Champions League next season, I think if the recruitment's good in the summer, and it has to be better than last summer because the 4 players that were signed, only Livramento's played, and even then he's, as I said on Friday, he's a second choice right back to Kieran Trippier, your club captain. The recruitment had to be better last summer. To not have seen Tonali, Hall or Barnes hardly this season has really cost Newcastle. 6 of that starting 11 tonight were here pre-takeover. 6 of those players played under Steve Bruce beforehand, and you would have thought that within 2.5 years the club would have moved on more than that. Look, I think Dan Burns has been great, I think Longstaff's great, I think Murphy, I think all of them have had really good times, but I just feel it feels like part of the team and the club's moved on, but part of it's sort of stuck where it is. And I think when you see sort of a team like Man City and you think about the takeover there, yes, they were under different rules or lack of rules back then, but they developed as a club and as a team so much more in 2.5 years than Newcastle have, and I suppose Newcastle have been allowed to due to the rules that they're dealing with. And I think that starting 11 tonight just kind of summed it up. I mean, yes, there were missing players tonight. I mean, I think even if you put the main players back into that right now, given the tiredness and the schedule, I still don't think Newcastle win that tonight. I think if they were playing 1 game a week like they were last season, they would certainly have a much better chance of nicking something here. But they just look like a tired bunch right now. I know Jamie Carragher said on Monday night they look like a team waiting for the end of the season. I know Eddie Howe's refuted that. For me, they do look like that right now, and I can see where Carragher was coming from. Whether a couple of weeks break, and well, for those non-international players, and look, the team are off to Dubai now. They're probably already at the airport heading off for some warm weather training and some rest there. Whether they can come back refreshed and ready to go for the last 10 games, we must wait and see. But look, for me, the bare minimum now is just to try and finish the season on a high, get some wins under their belt, and try and squeeze a European place. And at least that means there's something out of what has been a really, really testing season, really punishing season for Newcastle. And I think it was just all evident for everyone to see tonight. I don't think Eddie Howe will go back to a back 5 again. I think that'll be the one time he tries it. I think they'll go back to the usual tried and tested 4-3-3 moving forward. And look, he tried something different. I think a lot of people have been sort of questioning why he keeps playing the same again and again, and I think that showed you tonight that I think the players are suited to a 4-3-3. I don't think they are suited to a fat back 5 or a back 3, because they need to learn that from scratch, and they're well drilled in that 4-3-3. It's just been, I think, tiredness. I think individual errors. I think there's players who aren't playing up to the standards that they did last season, and perhaps have been affected by the amount of injuries, the amount of games they've played, and the fact that the schedule has been so punishing. But that's playing at the top level. That's what you need to do, and that's why these Man City players do it week after week, season after season, because they are top level players. Or perhaps maybe some of the Newcastle players have still got a bit to go if they ever want to get to that stage. So Look, pretty sad time. That's the season all but over, apart from the league games. But I think everyone knew it was going to happen, and I think you need to just take these 10 matches to build towards next season. You need to get the summer recruitment right. The players who come in need to be able to go into that starting 11 and improve the team, because that for me has been one of the real mistakes of the last year, that none of those 4 signings have really played at all, other than Tino Livramento, who wasn't here tonight. So none of those 4 at all played, other than Hall, who came off the bench towards the end. And by the way, I thought it looked quite good. I thought he looked decent. I thought Anderson looked decent, but the game was done by then anyway. But yeah, recruitment has to be better, and I think everyone knew this was coming tonight against Manchester City. The season pretty much drawn to a close. Use the last 10 games to build to next season, and see what it takes Newcastle. Perhaps even if they don't get Europe, if you're not playing in Europe next season, you can have a season similar to last, where you can be right up there challenging the top 4. So that's it, guys. Over and out from the Etihad tonight, where Newcastle, sadly to say, Newcastle Cup drought goes on, and I think for Newcastle, just a break over in Dubai, and they reset and recharge and try and eke something out of the last 10 games of the season. Okay, guys, leave your comments below. Keen to hear what you think, and I'll speak to you on the next video. Cheers now.